Welcome to Trailblazers, Charting Paths, Inspiring Destinies. I'm Dr. Subhashini, consultant obstetrician at Fernandez Hospital. It's a great honor and privilege to have Dr. Ravi Narayan, who is a public health consultant and health policy researcher who has been involved with promoting the social or the community paradigm in public health education and public health system development for more than 4 decades in various capacities. He was a faculty member at St. John's Medical College, Bangalore, and an overseas faculty member of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine before initiating SOCHARA, which is Society for Community Health Awareness, Research and Action, a health policy resource group working with state and central governments, international agencies, NGOs, civil societies, and people's movement in the country and globally since 1984. He has played multiple roles from coordinator, consultant, advisory board member at national and international networks to strengthen public health perspectives. He has worked with World Health Organization, ICMR, Planning Commission, and a host of Indian and international networks and campaigns, Global Secretariat of People's Health Movement, which is the global movement promoting the Health for All goal. Dr. Narayan, along with his colleagues in SOCHARA, has been amongst the foremost proponents of the community health paradigm in the country, evolving its framework, axioms, and associated concepts such as the paradigm shift, the social vaccine, and social epidemiology. An archivist, advisor, philosopher, and a storyteller. Today, he speaks to us on Beyond Medicine Towards a New Paradigm of Community Health, a Collective Journey. Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Over to you.
I would like to start by thanking the Fernandez Foundation and all of you for inviting me to share this journey. But at the very outset, I would like to start by saying this is not my journey, but a journey of a very large number of community health enthusiasts, community health action initiators, community health innovators, all of us who started roughly in the 1960s. And since then, there has been a steady stream of people whom we are all linking to, contacting each other. And so therefore, I represent today as a trailblazer, the trailblazing phenomena of community health initiators in this country, innovators, and those committed to health for all since the 60s. I will, of course, refer a little bit more to my own personal journey, but I would like to acknowledge at the very beginning that this is a very, very important movement in the country, and I'm just one voice, one part of that whole movement. I would like to start by just quoting from Robert Frost, a famous poem, just that last 2 lines, because I think it's very meaningful for all of us as doctors. Particularly, I'm presuming I'm speaking to a larger number of doctors than others. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that's what made all the difference. Sometimes in our lives as doctors, health workers, professionals of different type, there are various new experiences, some by accident and some by design, which become life-changing. And for those of us who are initially trained in hospital medicine, this is usually when one steps out into the community. And my journey is one that started like that, and I would like to start with that journey. Well, I would start my journey by talking about my roots, because I think it's very important for all of us when we start our professional journeys that we bring with us family, childhood influences, and these often make a little difference in our journeys. So for me, the most important part of this journey are my roots. I had migrant grandfathers who moved from Tamil Nadu, one to Lahore and one to Calcutta. My parents came as partition refugees from Delhi, from Lahore, and I was born and I grew up in Delhi from a family of partition refugees. But unlike many refugees whom you keep hearing about, we were lucky and privileged enough to find relatives who became part of an adopted family, and therefore we got much more support and solidarity than a lot of refugees. I went to schooling in modern school, which was a very wonderful schooling because it was a result of the national movement, and it was started by Raghubir Singh, and Kamala Bose from Shantiniketan had been sent by Tagore to give it some of the Shantiniketan values, and we grew up in that atmosphere. And finally, I must say that I was part of those years in India. The new constitution had come, and there was so much of social support that even I was a scholarship student. Now, all this affected me in the sense that I, till today, feel very, very close to refugees, to people in disasters. And we in Sochara, since we have been starting, have responded to more than 18 disasters in the country, which I shall mention later. The next thing that I'd like to start, the next slide. Next slide, please. My medical college. Now, quite by accident, I was coming from the north to the south to an interview in CMC Vellore, which was then even in the north well known as a very good very good place for medical education. But my mother had just heard about this new medical college called St. John's Medical College. It was just 2 years old, but she had heard such good stories about it that I decided to apply there. And just by chance, the entrance exam was a week before the Vellore exam. I went in, I was very impressed with the way the interview was conducted and the whole atmosphere. It was a pioneering college, young college, but what was very evident from the very beginning was a social purpose. There's a long history which I won't go into, even though I'm nowadays a historian of St. John's Archives also, was basically that it was seen as a medical college to serve an apex of a mission hospital pyramid, which had so many dispensaries and rural centers and health centers all over the country. And the dream of the people who started it was that young doctors and nurses would come out, and health professionals and all sorts of health workers would reach these places and reach out to make this preferential option. It was also a very wonderful college. It was early college, very national in its orientation, both among students and these faculty. We had very, very far-sighted and inspiring lay deans who, along with very, very inspiring and far-sighted religious and the bishops and so on, envisaged a college that would be a college with a difference. And finally, when I look back, I find that we were one of the early colleges which had ethics already in our syllabus, and a college that welcomed, even though it was very new and was basically establishing a sort of a social outreach. So whenever we students thought of something we wanted to do outside of the curriculum, not just for ourselves, but out for the community, we got a lot of support. Next slide. In 1971, I became an intern, came out of this college. Now, my mother had been a social worker and had worked with mother and child health programs and various orphanages and so on. In my medical school days, I used to go and sometimes teach at these places or spend time. And though vaguely in my mind, working at a smaller hospital or something to the community was there, I discovered when I thought about it as an intern that I had so little skills, so little information, so little experience out there in the community. I then decided, next slide. Then a very strange thing happened, and these are the accidents I'm talking about in life. There was a famous East Pakistan genocide, and the largest refugee movement in the world, about 9 million refugees who walked across a porous 1,000-mile border, and the government of India was forced to start nearly 1,000 camps, keep them close to the border, and make great efforts to get volunteer doctors, nurses, students. And three of us young doctors from St. John's, all of us interns, just in a spirit of adventure. I don't think we were wanting to be Albert Schweitzer or we were wanting to be any, missionaries. We just thought it would be great fun. Also, because I had a Calcutta linked background, I knew Bengali, and therefore we went there. And these 3 months completely changed my life. I often start the story of the East Pakistan refugee camps and then get lost in it. So I would request you to go to my blog because the whole thing has been taken. But it was just such a wonderful experience. Here I am as a young intern sitting in a clinic, but the clinic was built by us with the people. And inside there's another view of the hospital, so-called hospital, again built by us, all in cane, bamboo, and with thatch. And it was a real experience for me because deep down those 3 months, I think I was the happiest doctor in my whole career because I felt I was close to the community. I was using my medical skills, many of which were not geared to the lives of the people. But because we were interacting with the people, they taught us how to do things. And I was so thrilled recently when I heard that the Fernandes Foundation has started delivering in the sitting position because in 1971, the refugees taught me that that is the normal position for delivery. And most women who came for delivery couldn't understand why we wanted them to be sitting on a bed when actually all their lives they have seen people delivering sitting against the wall holding a rope. And we began to do that much to our own surprise, but with very good results. I then came back from, next slide. I came back and a very strange thing happened. I spoke to my dean. Who was very, very understanding. I spoke to my professor of community medicine, she was preventive and social medicine, who had sent us, who had kept in touch with us. And when they heard my stories, incidentally, before that, I had written little postcards every week from the refugee camps. It was put on the hostel mess notice board, and 5 teams of St. John's doctors, interns, nurses came there till December when the war broke out and the camps were wound up. But coming back to my story, I came and spoke to them, and I must thank both the dean. In fact, that itself is a sign of this commitment to social purpose, who saw my interest having moved completely away from hospital medicine. So they asked me to finish the rest of my internship. And from the first day of my graduation, I was called registrar in community medicine, actually linked to the PSM department, but kept in the our teaching hospital to help me explore what I could do outside of the hospital. I worked in an urban community health center close by. I helped with the cancer detection center, with staff welfare, with the creche and so on. And that's how my community health journey started. I soon realized that you could not do, next slide. Yes. I soon realized that I could not do, this just as a sort of without some training. And I was very lucky. I have a feeling that whenever you take the path less traveled, if you're following your own passion slowly, the road just keeps opening out, even if it's an unknown road. And for me, this happened time and again, it happened in fact the last 50 years that I've been in public health and community health. London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, quite accidentally and not anything to do with me, had linked up with St. John's Medical College to work with tea plantation labor and to support community-oriented healthcare. And I was selected then as a Ross Institute Fellow. Ross Institute is just the Department of Community Medicine in London School. I went to England to do public health and industrial health. Industrial health only because we had to work with plantation medicine, and there was no plantation medicine health course. When I went to, I had decided to do my dissertation in refugee camp, a disaster response. But I later was invited by both my professor there, who was my mentor, and my dean and professor here, that since I was going to come back to St. John's Medical College, it may be a better idea. And I thought, this is what my dissertation. trends in undergraduate medical education in India, training doctors. If I just go back one slide, could I just go back? When I came back to St. John's, I wrote a letter and some reflections in anguish, saying that what really worried me was that I have been a good student, but that my very scientific, modern, hospital-based medicine hadn't adequately prepared. So I wrote a strong essay saying, what's wrong with medical education, a student point of view. And quite by accident, I was asked to go to the first interns conference organized by the Indian Association of Advancement of Medical Education in Pune, hosted by AFMC. And I presented this paper. It was a cry of anguish as a young intern saying, can we change our medical education to suit community reality? I then went off to England. We can go back to the next slide. I wrote this dissertation. And when I came back, a few things happened. The first was that the Department of Preventive and Social Medicine had been renamed. You can come, next slide. Had been renamed as Department of Community Medicine. I think they're one of the first departments of community medicine in the country, along with CMC Vellore, which called it Community Health and Development, and All India Institute, which called it the Center for Community Medicine in those early days. What was very interesting was that I was starting a double career, a career as a teacher in a medical college with a new name for the department and with a mandate now to build community extension programs for students and interns as one of the curriculum experiences. At the same time, I also found that because of my involvement with the Ross Institute, I was, unlike many assistant professors and many lecturers, tutors who start their careers, I had an additional role that I could go and work in tea plantations in South India, in Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu and Kerala, especially with the United Planters Association of Southern India, improving public health, improving what later was called the Comprehensive Labour Welfare Scheme. And this really gave me a fantastic opportunity to work at community level. Now, another accident in my life was one student once came up to me and asked me whether this textbook of Park was quoting somebody called R. Narayan on the shortcomings of medical education. Now, even in my wildest dreams, since I never sent this paper to any journal, I didn't think it was me. I thought maybe there are lots of R. Narayans. Narayan's a very common name. But then when I looked at the references, I found and read the articles, and I found them in two different journals. So I set another sort of record, which now may be considered unethical. But since I never sent it for publication, and I don't know how the editors or who picked this up, and in these two journals, this article came. And this article was then referred to in the Parks textbook as the shortcomings of medical education, not being too cadaver-oriented, not community health-oriented, and that the young doctor is emotionally, professionally unprepared and emotionally incompetent to work in the community. That was quite a break, because for a young staff member to find a student coming and saying that you are in our textbook was a great, thing for me. We then moved on next. Yes. In London School, you might ask me what was so special about the US or the UK post-graduation. It was a great cross-cultural experience. We had 27 students from 24 countries. So it was a multi-country experience. But the most important thing I feel, and I tell a lot of postgraduates, is that while you can catch up a lot of curriculum, always go to a guest lecture because they have something to say. And I'd like to pay tribute to Professor Dennis Burkitt, who was very famous for Burkitt's lymphoma when he worked in Africa. He had just come back to England. He'd been, in fact, appointed as the head of the Medical Research Council because he had very good academic credentials as well. And he came to give a guest lecture. Until today, all my friends, students, colleagues know that I always start my lecture with these two slides. And these two slides, incidentally, were drawn by his school-going daughter. And he asked us these two provocative questions, which I leave with you as clinicians. He said, do you want to be floor moppers or tap turners off. And what he meant was that today we know, even then we knew, there are various ways of turning off the tap of disease. There are various ways of unblocking issues in society, in the family, in the individual environment that can reduce illness. But we doctors, with our multinational floor swabs, are constantly only tackling the overflow of disease without tackling its deeper roots. And therefore, I ask all of you, that how long can we floor moppers when all the illnesses that we treat, 90% of them today, due to the advancement of science and research, we can handle outside of the hospital, at the community level, at the family level, and at the environment level. The next question, the next slide, was equally important. He said, if any of you want to do health research, I'm sure you want to go behind a microscope, you want to get into the cell, go beyond the mitochondria. But what you should be, he said, in future will be called balloonist research. And this was one of the early research professors who was talking about studying social determinants. So in my mind, moving from molecular biology to epidemiological principles and social determinants is like the future of both medicine as we move towards health for all. I came back, I told you, to St. John's, the next slide. And here, I don't want to go into too much detail, except that we did two things. A group of us, I was joined by Dr. Thelma, who was a few years junior, but she was inspired by the Andhra cyclone. There was a Dr. Shivdi Prasad, her batchmate, a pediatrician, who was inspired by his short service in the armed forces when he went to Northeast. There was Dr. Mani Kaliat and many others, Mani Kaliat, who'd worked and wanted to work beyond hospital. And all of us, somehow, we had some connections with the department. And the department was moving through a most fantastic phase. There are very few departments I know, and I'm very proud to say that I belong to St. John's, where over a period of quite a few years, we sent 8 extension centers, not one rural training center as many medical colleges do, and then they overdo it, build it up build a lot of infrastructure, and it really ultimately cuts you off from the people. Whereas we had 8 rural centers, Malur, Silvapura, it's all listed there. I don't want to go into details, but anyway, we will then go on. The next thing we did was we not only took them to these, but we kept changing the curriculum, adding new things, adding epidemiology, adding statistics. I mind you, these are all early days. We're talking about the 70s, when MCI itself was trying to look for these ideas. And many of us, when we gave these ideas, the MCI picked it up, and slowly the medical education has changed. Now, this was a very interesting experience, and I really enjoyed it. The next slide. St. George was a very, I told you, outreach-oriented hospital. By that time, the famous community health worker scheme had started, the Janta Manual, which I'll come a little later. And St. John's was the first medical college, and probably the only medical college, that in addition to doctors and nurses, began to train community health workers. And these were initially religious priests and nuns who were school teachers, development workers, teaching them the basics of health. The next slide are 2 slides which show us doing that. Here it is, and I find it very interesting that in early years, I was sitting on the floor in a village center, training young doctors and nurses and health workers about community realities and learning at community level. There is Thelma again there, another colleague and now a co-initiator of Sochara with a whole group of people. And best of all is there is a senior professor sitting there on a chair next to a blackboard, who's General Mahadevan, one of the most respected community medicine professors, both in the country and in the army, who was inspired by the fact that he took the Polish refugees from to save them from Hitler's Germany, and as an army officer, and he was Major General who became, by the end of his 10 years with St. John's, Papa Mahadevan. I go on to the next slide. Yeah. This is a very unusual thing, and I always say that because many people now who will talk about the People's Health Movement, I'll come to it later, say, when did you start getting involved in movements? When did you think doctors and health workers should get involved in movement, in street action? And I say, well, I started at St. John's. And in St. John's in 1981, when the university, suddenly de-recognized us as an examination center based on some communal and other reasons, I was very happy, along with a few other similarly sort of oriented young doctor colleagues of mine from other departments, to organize a march of 900 doctors, nurses, and students into the community. And we not only walked, we walked all the way to the governor's house in silence. It was called the the March for Truth and Justice and Solidarity. It was in complete silence. And you won't believe it, that at the end of it, the governor was so impressed with our seriousness and the fact that we were doctors and nurses and not political activists, that within a day, the whole university, he was the chancellor of the university, this decision was. And I realized very early that all of us doctors have a role in advocacy, have a role in, changing policy, and that it can't always be done by just advising people in power. We have to sometimes put pressure on them. Next, I go to next slide. I then went, I took a little break then to go and finish my MD, because by that time there were some, issues about DPH and DIH. And so I went to do an MD in a very interesting time in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, 76 to 78. If you ask me what was so special about All India Institute, again, I would say, to me at least, it was called the Center for Community Medicine. And out of a 2-year MD, 6 months would be spent as medical officer of a rural health center in Haryana. And I think that was a very, very wonderful part of my life. And I still remember a young intern who was so taken up by all that we were doing in St. John's that he decided to do community medicine, and later became the professor and head of community medicine department, the ideal man of India, Dr. Chandrakant Panda. But anyway, this continues. So when you look back, I'm not telling you every story from my life. I'm just giving you little vignettes. 3 things happened during my 2 years in MD, which is very nice. One was ICMR. And this was, mind you, I was doing my MD 76, 2 years before Alma Ata. ICMR invited 14 projects all over the India, run by, and we were the only medical college project, Malur Health Center. Malur Health Center, which was included in that. And they decided to have certain a meeting called Alternative Approaches to Healthcare. Remember, this is 2 years before Alma Ata, and therefore it wasn't given this fashionable name called primary care. We still prefer the word community health, even alternative approach to healthcare, because primary often means something at a lower level, whereas we are talking about a completely different vision. So they brought these 14 together, and I was very happy to be part of that, meeting. Next slide. The Janta, time, the rural health scheme was very important. I don't know how many of you know that the Barefoot Doctor Scheme of China was inspiring public health and community health policies of all countries. And the Janta government, in response, created the Indian, community health worker scheme. But what was very important was his first page, a poem, which all our students and fellows and interns know, which was very close to me. Again, an inspiration for community health. Go to the people, live among them, learn from them, love them, start with what they know and build upon what they have, which to me are the 6 pillars of community health. Next slide. This also happened. And the third one was I came across 2 very interesting groups, but this one I mentioned particularly because I became part of it, literally a live member till now. This was the Medico Friends Circle. This was the time when I first met a group of lots of doctors. I felt less and less isolated. I suddenly came across a whole room full of doctors who were similarly inclined. All doctors, clinicians, then moving out slowly into community practice, beginning to raise questions about society, about social determinants, in a way, to me, it was the first decolonizing of our medical education, because all these young doctors were learning from the field. We then formed this group called the Medico Friends Circle, And I still remember all these books till today. We gather once a year or twice a year and discuss, and more young doctors who are stepping out from medicine to health, from hospital into community and to policy and to issues like that begin to come. Next slide. I came back to St. John's to continue my work, and we were then very much happy when the Alma Ata Declaration came. For many of us, including many in St. John's, the Alma Ata Declaration was not an inspiration. It was an endorsement, because we were already doing what they were saying we should do. And we felt that the endorsement was, many of our clinical colleagues thought we were a bit loony. We were doing things that we hadn't been trained to do. Health for all, building primary health care, building health as a right, appropriate technology, working on water, nutrition, intersectoral development, and working on cooperatives and things like that to increase participation. All of this either sounded a little bit out of the box, but not unusual, but very unusual for doctors to be thinking of it. And somehow the Alma Ata Declaration endorsed a lot of us. Next slide. We did a lot of work, and I don't want to go into details, but St. John's did a lot of work. I don't know how much that continues now, but it was one of the early community-oriented medical colleges, among at least the 10 of them whom Thelma and I studied later: JIPMA, All India Institute, CMC Vellore, Ludhiana, Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, and so on. And all of them very early on, even much before the Medical Council began to recommend it, began to send students out into communities and into to do community outreach and to learn from it, rural camps and so on. I won't continue. The next one, next slide. CS community health workers, the ASHAs, are very well known in India. They were given the WHO COVID award as COVID warriors. 1 million of these women, the pink sari women. But where did it all start? It all started in the 70s by the work of all these doctors in the community health movement. Here is a whole list of them, just to show you that this was the 70s and 80s. And 2 of those marked in red we were involved in. We were the only medical college that was training non-medical health workers, teachers and students, and teachers and social workers, and religious sisters and NGOs. And the other one was the Comprehensive Labor Welfare Scheme, where in the labor lines, tea pluckers were being picked up as link workers. And today, the whole movement that health workers should be supplemented by these link workers. I do worry sometimes that many of us these are not the frontline workers of our health system. They are the links between the community and our health system. And we must always respect that they have their own place in this scheme of things. We then come to the next slide, which is by 1982, we were beginning to feel, as we worked in the community, that there was a clear difference between medicine, which is all about ill-being, and health, which is all about well-being. And so we decided to move out. A few of us, Thelma and I, had decided, let's take a year off. We went around and we visited doctors from St. John's who had worked in the community. We visited our friends of the Medico Friends Circle. We spent basically a whole year out trying to understand health and medical challenges in those situations. And to our surprise, we found that there was so much being done and so much, but nobody seemed to know of it in institutions. And so this whole desire to leave the college and to create a sort of, so a group of us did that. It took us about 2 years. The Bharat Darshan was 82. By 84, we left and we started the Community Health Cell, we called it initially. Later, it became the Society for Community Health Awareness, Research and Action. So this stepping out of the hospital, at least at that time to me, was like, today I say, I explained by the end of this journey, what is it for clinicians? We're not asking all clinicians to do. We think they are necessary, but if they, I'll come to that later. Next, we go. Next slide. We first started by defining it, and for that we got all the people in the country who, outside of the medical college, the Voluntary Health Association, the Catholic Health Association, the Christian Medical Association, the Medico Friends Circle, the Indian Social Institute, and various other people together in St. John's in 1983 to think, is there something called community health? Are we imagining it, or is there something different? And this was the definition that community health is a process of enabling people to give priority, demand health as a right, and to also take responsibility for their health, in short. And so we started this center, next slide, called Sochara. And these are the two logos of Sochara. The early logo was just the sign that we were moving into the community, dealing with families in close to their own home situation. The new Sochara, as we have grown into policy, is very different. If you see a bigger version of it, you'll find that health is a celebration. So there are already dancing figures in our, logo. But more important, yellow is a sign of hope. And all those intertwining is not a column, but the fact that health is full of intertwining, intersectoral, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and we must respect that as we begin to plan for health. Next slide. Now we did a whole lot of things. We can move forward. We began to look at different people in the community and their health. We explored street children health. Next one. We explored women's health in various creative ways. We explored community health approaches to tackle alcohol and tobacco. We explored, next one, we explored vector-borne diseases. We explored environmental health. And what you would have seen in this, though it was a bit of a rushed presentation, that this was not a medical college or a clinic setup. We were sitting with communities, we were dialoguing with them, we were acting with them, we were sometimes enhancing their interest in this by art and culture and music and singing together. And we discovered this with our work, not our own work. All our work was done with partners. And whenever possible, because we had come from a medical college background, we invited other medical college staff. We called people from NIMHANS. And till today, I'm very grateful that people from NIMHANS, people from St. John's, from CMC Vellore, from All India Institute, now from TISS, from Asim Premji University, from Rajiv Gandhi University, all of them have participated. And in fact, many of them, when they retired from their jobs, joined Sochara as a society. We come next to the next slide, which is we also decided by then that if we all did our own little bit in some part of India, some little set of villages, a few, Jhuggi-Jhopadi colonies and cities, how are we going to change the whole understanding of health, both in academia, in research, in government policy, and so on? And so we decided, let's start networking. Now, we found that all our associations, IMA and Nurses Association, all were in silos. They were not talking to each other. Nobody was interested in health. So we decided to look at all the other associations. And as we began to look, we found networks and movements, sometimes the women's movement, the environment movement, sometimes the teachers' movement. We found, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Gandhian, all of them had networked their institutions. And we began to work with all of them saying, what do you think? And community health slowly began to be a movement. The next. By 2000 AD, as you know, World Health Organization had said health for all must come. And we were all initially very disappointed that health for all was not showing up at all. It was health for many more, maybe a few more, health for those who can pay, but not health for all. And we began to then try and understand why this was happening. And thanks to a few people like Dr. Thelma and others who went and did their PhDs on health policy and health, public health systems and so on, we began to understand that larger forces were affecting, the new neoliberal economic policies, globalization, and therefore this was increasing the disparities among people. It was increasing impoverishment, access to water, food, so on. And therefore, unless we began to look at these at a policy level, we couldn't do something. And that is how the idea of a movement came. This was not a political movement. It wasn't through electoral politics. It was more like a participatory democracy that people must reach out to the health system, to the academics, to the researchers in a group. And this must include the health people. All of us, after all, are citizens of the country. We're not only health professionals sitting in a silo. And what happens, and therefore we must get both street action. When I say street action, I mean not just political slogans, but we must get up like we did in the St. John's thing. Doctors and nurses and health workers and communities asking for change. And at the same time, we must also do policy engagement. Let's go to the next slide. And then we wrote some books. This is for public education because we are now going to read. These are books in Kannada. They were printed in 14 languages, looking at globalization and health, looking at primary health care, looking at intersectoral development. We then converted these into Kala Jathas, and we reach it to the people. Because how do you expect people to participate in health and policy if they don't understand and if we don't stop using jargon and Latin and other words and begin to speak in the local vernacular? And so we did that. Next. We began to organize them. I don't have time. This is my favorite topic, the People's Health Movement. And for most of you, this is something new because we as doctors are not necessarily part of movements. We may go and vote, but that's not the movement we're talking about. We're talking about health people becoming activists and professionals. And finally, in 2080, when 2,500 Indian members of this sort of community health movement, we called it the Jan Swasthya Sabha mobilization, came in 5 people's trains organized by the Indian Railways to Calcutta for the first meeting of the Jan Swasthya Sabha, the People's Health Assembly. And then 250 of us went across the border to Bangladesh for the first global assembly. And in the global assembly, a beautiful document, which I think is a document that all of you should read. Incidentally, apart from the Bible, I think it's the only other document in 50 languages of the world. And it's in your own language. So you must read it in Tamil, Kannada, Marathi, Telugu, and so on, and understand this is what the people are needing. This is what the people should be demanding. And we must interact with them to make this happen. And it very clearly says in 2000 AD that health is not only biomedical, techno-managerial. It has something to do with inequality, with poverty, with exploitation, violence, and the injustice that are at the root of ill health. And therefore, unless we tackle those, we can't do that. We will then next just go to the 1 or 2 more slides and I'll try. Next slide. We then began to do very interesting things. And please remember again and again when I say the People's Health Movement is health politics. It is working where, and all of us are doctors and health workers and medical students and nurses, but we're always with the community. Today, the RG Kar medical students, the whole protest is a very good example. They are fighting for their rights within the health system. They are not talking about other things, not that they shouldn't, but this is how we must begin to make, if security of hospital professionals and the staff members and, hospital staff is important, we have to get to our political leaders also through this sort of protest. But these are the early ones. We did People's Health Tribunals along with the NHRC. Next, we are leading the World Social Forum. A group of us are, working with our People's Charter, distributing them. And incidentally, there were 12 young Johnites who joined us as technical volunteers who I think were also inspired quite accidentally by this sort of large get-together of lots of... We wrote, when I say we, now I'm talking about the royal we, not me, but I was also the People's Health Movement Global Coordinator because the same process is now taking place in about 80 countries where public health and doctor-led and nurse-led movements of communities are beginning to demand right to health, not at a global level, but at their country level. And next slide. Here. If any of you are interested in the fact, but what is very important for all of you to remember, we are not talking about political activists. We're not talking about doctors or nurses who have joined a particular political party. We are talking about doctors and nurses who feel that health for those who can pay is not the same as health for all. And therefore, we need to gather together. We need to demand. We need to engage with policy. And we need to do this continuously. And this is a great movement. Here are just some highlights of, it might sound strange for some of you, ex-professor of community medicine, leading marches and so on. But I think it's so important. And these were not only health people, they were community people, traditional healers and so on, but basically demanding health as a right. When one of our colleagues, Dr. Thelma, went and did her policy PhD in London School, she came back. And thanks to her, we started another. One side we were building movements, people demanding health as a right, people. Another side, we decided that we were also professionals and we could engage with the health system. And here I just given 6 examples, which are well known. The Karnataka Task Force of Health and Family Welfare, the Karnataka State Policy, the report of NRHM, even the Public Health Foundation of India's original document, which was, talking to different sectors, and the Karnataka Jnana Yoga. All of them, if you study, what is so different about these from other policy documents? There are strong civil society voices, and there are strong civil society voices which include health professionals. But as I come to the end of my journey, it is, as I told you, a collective journey, but I feel very much involved because I played leadership positions in some of these. I think the fact that today when you Google health policy, words, there is a word called communitization in the National Rural Health Mission. We are the only country in the world which says that we must communitize our health. Communitize. And very interestingly, in the National Rural Health Mission document, we say this is institutionalizing community-led action for health by empowering communities to take leadership in health matters. This is very unusual. I can tell you won't find it in any. So just like the Constitution of India, which is such a wonderful document, in a way the NRHM document is saying that. And many things that we did before outside are now become, at least in policy, enshrined in the basic tenets of National Rural Health Mission. Unfortunately, there's a big gap between what academia is still teaching because the colonized minds of a lot of our medical educators who still feel West is best, who still feel that, big corporate commodified hospitals are going to solve health for all, has to be changed to say there's enough evidence all over the world, whether the work of Paul Farmer, whether the work of Hans Rosling, whether the work of all of us in different parts of the world, that things have to change. Now, I just 2 things before I finish. Very soon, you'll be surprised. Today, we're all, celebrating the contribution of Ratan Tata. And Ratan Tata, when he took over the Ratan Tata Trust, very strangely, we have a little link with them. He came to Bangalore. I know he didn't come, but he sent someone saying that we have done a little study among NGOs and, various people. And for some reason, there's some group called Sochara, which keeps coming out as a sort of a buddy, mentor, or somebody who's giving them advice, helping them learning. And so they came to us, and they are the ones who said, would you like to start getting into HRD? You're in your 20th year, you're all getting old. Would you like to take young people and teach them this? Initially, we were not very keen, but what we did was we sat and we discussed and found about 20 young people, 19 or 20, who had already come to us in the early stages, not for a learning program as such, but they had worked with us as assistants. And they helped us build up this idea of the community health learning program, which we started under the leadership of Dr. Thelma, who is one of the co-initiators of Sochara. And it was to develop a critical mass of community health practitioners and activists with scholarship and competency to work towards health for all. Initially, we were working with doctors and nurses and health workers and health professionals. But slowly today, as we are in something like a 16th or 17th or 18th course thing, we had every single discipline represented. And it's a lovely multidisciplinary, multisectoral and, people. What is interesting is that a lot of the learning is by doing. And even during COVID time, when it was difficult to do offline and, give people chances of community, we got community-based professionals, people who had done it themselves in the community, to come and be the online mentors. And we have everybody here. I just 2 photographs next to those 2. Next one. No, sorry, it is before that. Those are just photographs, as the numbers became bigger, we've been using our old Medical College St. John's facilities. And in Sochara, the number is just increasing and increasing. And today I'm happy to say, as I reach the end of this journey, that there are about 500 young people who've been through an English course, a Hindi course, an online course, an offline course, a hybrid course, or have been fellows, interns, flexi fellows with us, all of whom are part of a CH friend circle. And we believe that those of us who initiated Sochara in 84 and then slowly began to step off in 2016 can leave a very large collection of young people. Two other things. Next slide. Yes. This is, it seems like a complicated one, but I just want to say, Sochara also decided from about, since the success of the NRHM dialogue, that we should work with everybody and take community health, health for all, the social determinants and all these concepts into mainstream. And so here is a big list, which is probably difficult for many of you to read, but you'll be surprised. There are academic institutions like All India Institute and PGI Chandigarh. There are foreign academic institutions like Harvard, Hopkins, McMaster, McGill. We have gone to all of these. We have helped other people go, and we have constantly talked about what I would summarize in 3 slides now, that there is a new dimension. This is not preventive medicine, part of medicine. This is community health. Health is well-being, and the construct in that sense. Recently, both WHO CRO since 2009 has produced these 3 books, and in all of them you will find that the Sochara determinants of health, they didn't say go to Sochara and involve them in public health and so on, the People's Health Movement. All these things you would never expect in a WHO CRO document. And the next slide, you'll find are the 2, both the social determinants thing of the WHO and a thing. So I would like to end by just saying that there are 5 lessons from this trail of community blazers or community trailblazers. The first is that there are 2, the yin and yang of the new public health. The reason we call it new public health is when you say community health, people get confused, or they say, oh, that's preventive medicine. We are saying, no, this is not preventive medicine. This is not even just public health, because the public health has lost the public in its public health. We have to do this. The first, that we must empower people. And it's every professional's job to empower them. Today we know the NCD epidemic is not just NCD epidemic. It is the food industry and our environment, and all of this has to be, and the only way we can do it is empowerment. And the other side is we have to have systems development that look at these. The next learning is that there are certain values in public health. As health systems, public health systems, medical systems are getting more commercialized, more commodified, more selectivized, we need to decide that there are some basic values. And I think it's about time for all health professionals in the country to accept that equity, these values have put equity, social determinants of health, pluralism, all these are values that we must begin to see so that we can separate. There are some new concepts which I won't go into, but all of these are now have been put into peer-reviewed journals. They are available, but they are on the periphery. They haven't still reached our medical colleges. They haven't reached. But what I want to tell you that this is not just activism. It's the creation of a new understanding. And any of you who are interested will please always be in touch with us. All of these you can read. And I think doctors particularly have to, begin to widen their horizon. Now, could I just leave the last slide as the message, the final takeaway? For all of us, I know many of you are clinicians, many of us are doctors who are listening into this. Therefore, it is the community, family, people, and patients must be co-creators and participants of the systems we function, and not just users, clients, and beneficiaries. Once we do that, all of you will become community health initiators and innovators, not even leaving the hospital. And I think the Fernandes Foundation is a good example where they're doing this and changing obstetrical care to much more, benign and not much more positive, mother-oriented, women-oriented maternal care. Thank you.